Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the Economic and Community Development Committee meeting. Today is Monday, June 13th, 2022. I am joined by my colleagues today, Councilmember Larmer and Councilmember Michaud. So thank you, everyone that's joining us. We do have an adjusted agenda that came out this morning. So we've added one item for information only that we will get to in just a few minutes. So first up, are there any changes to the agenda? Thank you. So with no changes, we will move on to the business portion of our meeting. And the first item is approval of the minutes from the May 9th meeting. Do I have a motion?
Chair, I move to approve the minutes from May 9th, 2022.
All right. Any discussion? Oh, second.
Second.
I have a motion and a second. Any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? All right, the minutes pass unanimously. Thank you. First up on our agenda is an information-only item, which is on the bridges. So I'd like to welcome our Deputy Economic and Community Development Director, Matt Gilbert. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And thank you for allowing us to walk this item on tonight. There's been a little bit of flux with this situation that I'll tell you about in a minute, but we appreciate the opportunity. So mostly what I'm here tonight to do is two things: to give you a quick update on the progress of Kent's work with the City of Auburn on the bridges, and to give you a heads up on a resolution that will be coming the Council's way. We thought we'd let you know. So as I've talked to you about before, so the process with Auburn so far has been mostly about infrastructure. The bridges is a big neighborhood, 379 homes, I believe. Lots of storm pipe, lots of roads, storm ponds, et cetera. The City of Auburn has been very interested in knowing as much as they can about before they inherit that or they're evaluating that. So they've asked us for records on how the streets and storm systems were built, how they've been maintained, and then their current state of repair. And we've dug through a lot of our archives to find that and provide that to them. And the good news is the list has been whittled down, and we're now to the point of moving forward. You know, you ask engineers with their opinion on things, they want a lot of info, and so we've provided that. Moving forward then, we're looking at about the next few months. I'll tell you now, our goal is to have this work wrapped up or very close to it by the end of the year. So we've got an aggressive schedule that really has two main components. One is public outreach, and the other is working with the King County Board of Adjustment. That's the body that oversees all annexations and boundary changes for special purpose districts, et cetera. So we need to engage with that boundary adjustment board. They have an application process that asks a lot of detailed questions. We need to prepare that application and send it to them. Now, the City of Auburn is pursuing a resolution from their council before they engage. So we're going to be engaging together, and because we want everything to kind of move forward in tandem, we will be bringing forward this resolution on the 21st to the full council with no prior action. It'll be other business, we believe, or we've actually talked to Council President Boyce. As other action, it's really a step just to get the council's concurrence that we take this big step forward. So like I said, it's good to move forward together. Anyway, so that's the bureaucratic kind of administrative stuff. Public outreach is something we've talked with Auburn about. We had a really productive meeting last week with their administration. And our rough schedule is to, after June 21st, we'll publish a website with frequently asked questions. I've been working with their HOA president to kind of develop that list of questions. So the goal would be that the neighborhood has all the information they need in order to have a well-informed opinion about whether or not they support the annexation. And then at the end of that process, what we'll do, we want to do a community meeting, do National Night Out, have some information resources there, and then ask them, what do you think? Do you object, really, to being a part of Kent, or I'm sorry, becoming a part of Auburn? And we hope also to get some official action from the Homeowners Association so that the councils on both sides have a really clear understanding of where the public who will be directly affected by an annexation, de-annexation, stands on the issue. So that's all I have for you tonight. I'd be happy to answer any questions.
All right, anyone have any questions? Councilmember Larmer.
I do have a question, thank you. So the resolution, remind me, we've not done a resolution of this, or?
Not exactly. There was a resolution back in April that officially authorized the staff or directed the staff to engage in this kind of evaluation process. We'd been doing that informally for a long time, so we really,
I thought I remembered one.
To keep us all moving forward together, and when the council's stamp of approval or stamp of direction is on something, it kind of really cements it.
So this new resolution is different because it's
the next step in the process. Auburn feels that they need that council stamp of approval or direction before going to the Board of Adjustments. And like I said, since we want to kind of hold hands and move together,
same thing,
not create any kind of questions about why is one city doing something and the other is not, we agreed to bring that forward to you and your colleagues.
Okay, great. That was my only question. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions? Thank you. I appreciate this as well because we've been talking about this for years now, and I think we'll get to that end goal that everybody wants to get to. It will just take a little bit more time.
It's happening.
Yep.
It's happening.
Well, I appreciate all the hard work. Thank you.
You got it. Thank you.
All right, moving on to the next item of business, which is the 2022 to 2027 Parks and Open Space Plan Update Adoption Ordinance. And I know we've seen this many times in multiple places, but it's always good to have you here, Terry, and we get to take action on this tonight. So thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Madam Chair, council members. Thanks for having me here once again. I think the last time I'm going to give this presentation. A little bit sad to see it go, but also happy to work on some other things too. So as you said, what we're here for tonight is the formal part of the process, which would allow us to adopt this into the comp plan via amendment. And this is the action item that gets us to council. So this is a graph that kind of shows our overall process as we're moving through. We've seen this several times in all previous versions of the presentation, but kind of initially we move into an information collection phase. We're looking at various reports around the region. We're collecting a bunch of internal information. You'll recall all of the GIS work that we did through this process, the GIS inventory analysis, the property layers, all of this being compiled within our geodatabase. We take all this information. We also are conducting stakeholder interviews. We had a statistically valid survey and a general survey. The statistically valid survey, when we looked at the demographics and the results of that survey, it was a very close match to the demographics of the city, so very happy about that. We'll talk about that a little bit more. All of this information that we collect then moves into a data crunching phase where we're actually looking at all of these data points and starting to form some recommendations and decisions around each of these. We did a refresh on our CRV, PRV scores. We did an asset lifecycle assessment. We looked at our athletic system and what capacity it has to grow, and we did the geospatial heat mapping. Then we move into sort of the reporting phase, taking those recommendations, actually putting them into the final reporting document. Within that, you see us developing themes and a vision for the plan moving forward. Of course, we have our strategic project list. Then we also are developing from that list an O&M and funding plan strategy. And then the final step was one last engagement phase where we put the plan out for public comment for 3 weeks. We had a pretty good turnout in that on engagekentparks.com, and then we closed it, incorporated as many of those comments as we could, and put it into the final plan. So here's a little bit more information about this information collection phase. We looked at things like demographics, recreation trends, benchmarking. We did engagement citywide. We also did some focused discussions with stakeholders and some community-based organizations. And we also looked at how this planning exercise really is incorporated into the city's overall planning and how it touches other planning initiatives by the department as well. So there's a graph within the plan that shows how all those plans are interconnected. This is a chart on the right-hand side that shows all the steps of this engagement. It was a really comprehensive engagement that we did. That number at the bottom is outdated now because we had roughly 100 more different comments come in through that final engagement. So we're over 3,000 touch points with the community through this plan. It's a number we're really proud of through all the various pop-up events, surveys, website touch points, and so on. Just a refresh of the survey and what we heard through that survey. You know, I wouldn't say it was anything new, no new information that we heard through that survey, but really solidifying some things that we thought we understood about the desires of residents as it relates to our park system. There are kind of three main themes popping up. Of course, restrooms is always at the top of everyone's list. We don't do those everywhere, though, only really in community parks. But beyond restrooms, people are really looking for three things out of their park system: access to nature, trails, and community gathering spaces. These are sort of the core fundamentals of what it means to be outdoors and be in parks. And so taking all of these components and what the top priority investment areas for people, and then incorporating those into the recommendations and the strategic projects within the plan. We did a refresh of our recreational value system. We have two approaches now to level of service. We have the performance-based LOS. That's something that was developed within the 2016 plan. This looks at not just the quantity of acreage, but it looks at the quality and the quantity of amenities within that acreage to give an actual recreational value to the park. Acreage is not enough to truly serve the residents of the city. So we did a refresh of all the parks and their scoring within that system, but we're also looking at a traditional level of service metric. Acreage is important because it helps us address park deficiencies in areas where we don't have it. And so it focuses on acquisition, while the performance-based LOS focuses on things like reinvestment, maintenance, and development of new parks. In addition to the recreational value scoring, as I mentioned before, we did our full GIS inventory, and having all that geospatial information really allows us to be precise about where we have recreational value in the city, and that then rolls into the heat mapping, which we'll take a look at here in a second. We developed a little bit of a more specific and detailed city regions map that allows us to break the city up into subsections, and just makes it easier to sort of plan and look at geographic equity and investment. And then obviously we also looked at our athletic capacity and where we can make improvements there. This is the benchmarking chart that you see throughout the plan. Kind of the first metric that we're going to focus on here, sorry about that, just at the top in terms of acreage. When we compare ourselves with the NRPA, so that's the National Recreation Parks Association, when we look at ourselves across the United States with other cities of a similar size, we really are low in terms of acres of parkland per 1,000 residents, and that points to the need for an acquisition strategy. We really are going to need to acquire parkland if we plan to keep pace with the growing population of Kent. So that has to be coupled with this reinvestment strategy. And then looking at some of these other metrics too, we do very well with trails. We do really poorly with soccer fields. This got pointed out within the athletic capacity study that horizontal field spaces are highest efficiency when it comes to the athletic offering within the city. And we do fairly well on baseball fields, really well with softball fields and cricket pitch. We're developing our first practice pitch out at North Meridian and looking to make improvements from there. This is the heat mapping that we looked at. The heat mapping, as a reminder, looks at access of parkland, and it looks at it through the lens of current recreational value and potential recreational value. So that's sort of the basis for the mapping, and then through that, we have 4 layers of information that are built into this heat map that you see on the right-hand side. So population density, that's in the upper left-hand corner. So basically, if you have a high population density that serves more residents, therefore you get a higher score. Access to transit gives you a higher score on that park. Racial and social equity was important, and what's built into the racial and social equity layer of information within this is race and ethnicity, socioeconomics, and health metrics. And then the final piece of this is walksheds, which ties back to the access. You see the city region map there on the left-hand side, and then on the right-hand side is just a couple of zoom-ins on that heat mapping that we saw. So not to say that we figured it all out. We need more time to really study the heat mapping, and it's more of an iterative process to be constantly referring back to the heat map as we're doing the implementation of this plan. But just a couple of observations that we've made. On the West Hill, we've called out Midway as a high-need area. It's highlighted there in yellow and orange. We know pretty well at this point all the deficiencies that we have in East Hill North, so it points to the Panther Lake area. We're developing the Hughes property kind of in a response to that. We'll also be looking at the Mountain Juicy property in response to that as well. Some kind of sections of really between East Hill North and East Hill South, so there's some deficiencies there in and around the Garrison Creek area. And then on the south end of East Hill, kind of at the tip of Mill Creek Canyon, we know there's some deficiencies there. So each of these points to a different strategy as to how to address it. Some of it's acquisition as it relates to the West Hill, some of it's development as it relates to East Hill North, And on the East Hill South, it's really more of a reinvestment strategy. Let's make better use of the parkland that we have. All this information really rolls into these goals and outcomes. So we've got 4 goals at the highest level, and then each of the outcomes below that relates back to the goals. So the goals are transparency and communication, physical access for all, diversity of high quality amenity, and system resiliency. And you can kind of see the color coding there on the outcomes with the nodes around each of them tells you which of those goals the outcome is associated with. These are then sort of the basis by which the individual strategic projects are scored. You can see the scoring out to the right-hand side of the list of projects. Access, equity, strategic amenities, programming, athletics, trails, natural resources, operation, maintenance, partnerships. There's more detail in the plan as to what each of those represents and what the scoring behind them represents. The other thing that we built into this is 2 metrics. One is near, mid, and long term. So what it really means is near-term projects are essentially happening now or in the planning phases. Midterm projects would be good candidates for the next round of funding, and long-term projects have some major obstacle that's preventing them from moving forward. So really not a clear timeline on those projects that are in the long-term category. And then the project complexity out on the right-hand side really just tells you, is this an expensive project or an inexpensive project? Is it low-hanging fruit, or is it one that's going to take a much longer time to implement? So it kind of scales from $1 sign up to $3 signs. We'll go through each of these regions really quick. We've talked about this so many times at this point that I feel like I'm repeating myself, but just looking at the West Hill region, Salter Vista, that's a project that's under construction right now. Actually, we started today rather. So really happy about that project. West Fenwick Park, kind of the final phase there and completing that project. The West Hill land acquisition, that really points to the need for acquisition up on the West Hill. So that's sort of in the midterm category. And in the long-term category is development of a neighborhood park within the Midway area, and doing something about developing a new sports facility within the city. In the downtown region, 4th and Willis Greenway, that construction's wrapping up right now. Kearson Park, that project just went to bid and was awarded last week, so that's one that's in motion and happening right now. We've got the master plan, Earthworks, and Mill Creek Canyon, all in the near term. In the midterm, we're looking at projects like Riverview Park and Signature Point, part of the extension of the levee. It takes several years to implement those levee projects. In the long-term category, we have things like Town Square Plaza and Kent Memorial Park because of the complexity of those projects and what we know about some of the obstacles in the way of each of those. In the Green River region, we're doing pretty well there, so the list is relatively short in terms of what investments we need to make, but Boeing Rock and Van Doren's obviously under construction this summer, so those are projects that are in the near term. Three Friends Fishing Hole, Briscoe in the midterm, and looking at a different management strategy, I would say, for GRNRA, the Green River Natural Resource Area, and working on a partnership with Public Works about long-term management of that facility. East Hill South region, Morrill Meadows Park, Phase 2, that's a project we hope to be under construction on later this summer. Springwood Park, that's under design, moving in an RCO grant application, that's in the near term. In the midterm, we're looking at master plan update for Clark Lake and looking at phased implementation of that. And then in the long term, we have 132nd Avenue and 272nd Park. Both of those are new park developments. And because of what I'll describe here in a second about funding and O&M, those are ones that are in the long term because of the need for O&M resources to support those projects. And lastly, in the East Hill North region, we've got the East Hill North Community Park Project, master plan moving forward this summer on that. In the midterm, we have the Mountain Juicy property. We've talked about that one a lot as well, but that's one we know is going to help us fill a critical neighborhood park gap within that area of the city. And then East Hill North Park Development just points to the need for more acquisition within the East Hill North to address those needs. So how do we do all this? It's a lot of work. How do we fund it? How do we keep our department running smoothly with all this investment? Well, so we have approximately $6 million that we get in Parks Capital every year, and that's a fantastic funding source. We made huge improvements from the 2016 plan to now, and it's really a sustainable funding source. But in order to proceed with all the work that we've captured within this plan, we've calculated that we would need roughly an additional $4 million per year of capital to implement all of these projects. $1 million of that would be reinvestment, $3 million of that would be development. That number does not capture acquisition at all. Acquisition is going to require a separate funding source if we plan to pursue major land acquisitions within any area of the city. Then on the O&M side, we based on the proposed projects that we have, to implement all proposed projects utilizing existing properties, an increase in O&M budget of approximately $3 million spread over 20 years. And so that's an increase of $300,000 every other year, which roughly equates to 1 FTE every other year. So we need to allocate an FTE basically every budget cycle if we plan to keep pace with all the expansion, development, acquisition priorities that we set within this plan. And the graph to the right really just represents a high-functioning, high-performing park system where all of these components are being funded. The capital and the O&M are being funded proportional to the population increase, so you can keep pace with that recreational value over time. This is just a quick capture of our process so far. Back in January of 22, we did Parks Commission. We had council workshop in February of 22. We presented to the Land Use and Planning Board on 4/22, council workshop on 5/22, Land Use Planning Board hearing on 5/23. We did another Parks Committee presentation on 6/2, ECDC, that's where we are today. So we're here on 6/13, and this is all moving forward for council adoption on 6/21, and then shortly thereafter we would send this over to the RCO for recognition within their system to be eligible for grants in the current cycle, which we have 4 grants moving forward right now. In terms of next steps, and this is written into the conclusions of the plan, kind of the final piece of it is moving forward with the story map. We've seen some early versions of that. I'm really excited to be able to put that up on our website because it really is going to be kind of the Cliff Notes version of the plan. You know, if you don't have time to read 300 pages of the plan, and I don't know who would, but if you're still interested in the plan, I would recommend going and cruising through that story map. It's going to have the interactive mapping component inherent to that as well. We're moving forward with asset management. Actually, we just met on that this morning. So with our new GIS position, we're now coupling that with an asset software that's going to allow us to get more sophisticated in how we report our O&M data. We need additional funds for operating and capital. We have our nature score methodology we want to move forward with. The department's moving forward with a goals and policies update over the course of the next year. We did hire our full-time GIS. My goodness, I'm so happy about that. And as we looked at the athletic capacity study, it pointed to a better partnership with the Kent School District. The department is also going to be looking at an overall park strategic framework, which is a roll-up of all the individual plans within the department into one overall department strategic plan. And then all this is really part of a step towards CAPRA accreditation, which would be a massive accomplishment for our department over the next 3 or 4 years. So that's it in a nutshell of what we did through the course of this plan. I'm really excited to be able to move this through for final adoption and start to implement these projects. Thanks for your time. I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Terry. Any questions for Terry? All right, so
That's a body of work.
Thanks a lot.
Councilmember Michaud, as chair of the Parks Department, or Parks Committee, I'm sorry. I just upped your title there. Would you like to present the motion?
Yes, Madam Chair. I move to recommend City Council adopt an ordinance amending the Comprehensive Plan's Park and Recreation element to incorporate the 2022 Parks and Open Space Plan.
Second.
All right, we have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor, please say aye.
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 Any opposed? All right, it passes unanimously. Thank you, Terry, and we'll see you on the 21st.
See you there.
All right. Next up, we have, is it the Dulay Property Comprehensive Plan Map Amendment Request? And I'd like to welcome Kaelene Nobis. Thank you.
Hello, how are you all today? All right, perfect. So good afternoon. As you all know, I'm Kaelene Nobis. I'm the Senior Long Range Planner with ECD. I'm here today to present to you our 2021-2022 Comprehensive Plan Amendment request. We received only one from the public. So I want to do a kind of just a brief overview of the CPA process, and then we'll dive right into this proposal we got from a member of the public. And then I'm going to go over public comment and testimony and staff recommendation. So members of the public can request updates to our comprehensive plan once per year, every year on September 1st. This year we received one timely request, and council voted that we move forward to include it on the work plan for this year. Since then, that was in December, we have gone to Land Use and Planning Board and had an information only. We've also had a Land Use and Planning Board public hearing. And Land Use and Planning Board, we just did that on 5/23, and they recommended action towards ECDC. We're going to get into how their action recommendation is different than mine in this presentation. So first off, let's dive into the initial request. So I'm going to zoom in on the map on the next screen so you'll be able to see it closer. But we received one request that we're calling the Dulay amendment, and it's for the 2 parcels north of the Sonic and Starbucks development. They have off of 116th and Kent Kingley. And they've requested moving their designation from single family 6 dwelling units per acre to mixed use. So what happens is they brought this proposal, and I brought it forward to a land use and planning board, and we had a very spirited discussion about the applicant's proposal and what all could be built under this proposal. And I think it's important with CPAs to remember that we're reviewing the land use, not a project. And so what the 3 different types of zones that would be allowed under a mixed use designation are CC, GC, and MRT 16. So under current Kent City Code, some of those zones allow commercial-only development in addition to mixed use. This is an important piece of information for the switch in our decision. We also have to look at, since we don't have a project, what is the most amount of development we might be able to see here in a difference from going from single family to a mixed use, in which, of course, it would be a much significantly larger building with less setbacks. Land Use and Planning Board was initially concerned about this and asked staff to instead review a designation for medium density multifamily, which we included as well. So we went back to the drawing board, and in addition to the applicant's proposal, staff initiated a review for medium density multifamily, and that's in your staff report as well, because there was a leaning to, well, maybe more commercial isn't, I could sense from Land Use and Planning Board that maybe more commercial wasn't exactly what they wanted here, but could we get it at fixing our housing issue, right? That was the big thing, is we want to see more housing. Could we do this instead? So we reviewed this, but we're going to get into the criteria and why. So as my job as city staff is to look at the criteria in Kent City Code for either of these, which we did for both. And one is that the amendment will not result in public health, safety, general welfare. The second is that it's based off of information that was not available at the time of the adoption of the original comprehensive plan, which is in 2015. The third is that it results in a long-term benefit to the community as a whole. And the fourth is that it's consistent with the goals and policies of the comprehensive plan. As I alluded to earlier, reviewing whether or not proposals are consistent with the comprehensive plan, it is very easy to find policies that both support a proposal and negate a proposal. Both of these were essentially, the terminology I like to use is on the razor's edge, right? I could find a way to get to yes, and I could find a way to get to no. And staff being tending to lean towards, okay, we could see if there's multifamily development here, how this could be a good proposal, went to Land Use and Planning Board with a recommendation for approval. So we had a public hearing on June 23rd, 2022, where staff recommended approval. At the beginning of that meeting, I was receiving phone calls and text messages from the public who were not able to enter the meeting. There was a public notice snafu where the incorrect Zoom link was on the notice that was sent out to the public. And I was very excited about this notice because I extended the radius mailing per council's guidance. We had an issue years past with Oak Point, and so instead of just following the code, I actually reviewed a map and made sure that every single person in that neighborhood received that notice. The radius mailing went from 300 feet to 500 feet. This was not caught until, of course, we were in the meeting, and I was getting emails from people who couldn't get in. So we did not exactly handle that we weren't sure how to handle that. And so at the time on the call, it was a Zoom meeting, legal counsel, we looked at and said, okay, well, Land Use and Planning Board wanted to recommend approval, but we also wanted to make sure that people who couldn't get into the meeting had the opportunity to comment. So the decision we made was to extend the comment period. So after the meeting was over, I sent out a second notice notifying the entire community and the 2 residents of the rental properties that live in that property, because I got return to senders. So these are my return to senders, to make sure that the people who needed to get the notice got the notice. And in between that hearing and now, I've received more public comments, all of which are urging us to deny the proposal. So I inserted, you have a packet that mirrors mine. It's long, so we won't go through all of them, but I will give you a general synopsis of kind of the main themes that I've seen in the public comments. So we had 4 people who were able to get into the meeting. 2 of those people have called me and I've spoken to them, and I feel like we've adequately addressed their concerns. We do have a member of the public here today who I'm sure will tell us if we have not. So let me go into the public comment for you. So I think the main issues that were addressed by the public were concerns about the intersection, and that staff had not reviewed anything about the traffic congestion at the intersection. The member of the public, all of them brought this up, but one of them actually did a public records request through PD and got some accident records that they sent to me for the intersection, and I spoke to Public Works. And while there have been projects at this intersection to increase the safety, and ideally they hope that that will continue to, the safety of this intersection will increase in the future. It has been one of our worst intersections in the city for traffic accidents, over 120 in the last 3 years and 300 in the last 10. So it is a founded concern. There were also a lot of concerns about from the residents behind the existing Sonic Starbucks development about how that new development has severely decreased their quality of life. We have received comments about noise, glare, issues with trash, specifically in the Seven Oaks Park. It has been, since the car wash has gone in, I'm no longer in current planning, but we have received many complaints from that neighborhood. So this is not unbeknownst to us. And generally, the concern about our development regulations and what significant tree removal this would pertain would just exacerbate some of those issues, because they saw all the trees come down with Sonic and Starbucks, and they're kind of they're looking at these dozens of 60-foot tall Doug firs as a protection from this commercial corridor that they're concerned about the removal for these trees. So given that, we looked again at our comprehensive plan consistency, and as it was a razor's edge before, there are pieces about this that are not consistent with our comprehensive plan. If we cannot guarantee that there will be multifamily here, and it could be a commercial development, then it's not consistent with the comprehensive plan. There's also to keep in mind future comprehensive planning efforts. So we're right on the precipice of, we're doing our major comprehensive plan update for 2024, where we're in the process of retaining a consultant and looking at how are we going to treat our corridors like this for the next 20 years. And what we have been doing up until this point is this piecemeal rezoning, piece by piece. This corner is historic for coming to you all for changes back and forth on comprehensive plan amendments. So perhaps an overall look at this corridor would be better than what we've been doing up until this point. And of course, new information learned through public comment. Staff have addressed that has been sufficient enough for us to change our recommendation, which is atypical from Land Use and Planning Board, since they recommended approval to you and we are recommending denial. So your next steps are to make a motion tonight, either to, you could go back with the applicant's original proposal if you would like, or the medium density multifamily, or deny the request, which is staff's recommendation again. So if you have any questions, I'm sure you do. That was an interesting one. So that concludes my presentation, but I'm here for questions.
Thank you so much. I'm going to start with Councilmember Michaud.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Wasn't the vote at the Land Use and Planning Board almost split?
Yes.
It was close, wasn't it?
We did not have a full board either. We did have a quorum, but we did not have a full board. And the vote was split. If we had had a full board, who knows if it would have gone the other way. And so it was 3-2.
Thank you, Councilmember Larmer.
Yeah, thank you. So I actually think despite the Zoom issue, this was actually a good example of why we do the public notification, and we get more information to make better judgments from it. So I think it's actually a good example of the process working despite a little hiccup there with the Zoom link. So good job on that.
Thanks.
And I think part of that is probably because you extended the search radius. So appreciate that notification change. So that I don't really have any questions. I think I share the concerns that I'm reading and are highlighted. And so I think, I would be in favor of making a motion to deny this tonight if there was no other questions.
All right, any other questions? All right, please go forward.
With that, I recommend City Council deny the docketed comprehensive plan amendment CPA 2021-7 as proposed by the applicant.
Second?
All right, we have a motion and a second. Any other discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor, please say aye.
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 Any opposed? All right, motion passes unanimously. Thank you very much, Kaelene. That brings us to the last item on our agenda, which is ending the meeting. So thank you, everyone, for joining us this afternoon. We are adjourned.